Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Wade T. Lightheart with Maddie G, co-founders of Bioptimizers, and we are pumped and excited because today we have a living legend on the podcast today. In fact, the guest that we have today is none other than Garcia, who is recognized as a leading authority on age reversal and healthy aging. He's also known as the nutritionist to the stars. Virtually a ton of A-list celebrities, including Hilary Swank, and one of my favorite movies, Million Dollar Baby. That was an amazing movie. Her transformation, where she added 19 pounds of lean muscle and then lost it safely once the movie was completed. I mean, that in itself is just unbelievable. I want to know more about that. He's got over 40 years of experience transferring from being a photographer to one of the leading nutritionists in the world. And he's developed some extraordinarily unique ideas that we're going to dive into. He talks about his holographic model of nutrition and anti-aging, the use of natural hormone pharmaceuticals, plant-based phytohormones, cognitive health. And of course, he's very well known for some of his books like Look and Feel Fabulous Forever and Redesigning 50. Oz, welcome to the show.
Wade, I'm beyond delighted. Thank you so much, man. Thank you very much.
Well, you know, I was diving through your background because, of course, everybody knows you've been in the magazines, you've been on the TV, you've done the whole circuit, and everybody kind of sees that. But I think what's a great start is to find out, how did you end up as moving from a photographer into the health industry? And I do know there was a little thing about the miracle of fasting connection that kind of turned you on to things with Paul Bragg, which was one of my kind of intros into the holistic health world. So
sure.
What's the background for our listeners of how you got started in this whole journey?
I've been around for quite a while. I got interested initially in nutrition back in the 1970s, early 70s. And my training was photography, fashion and beauty photography. So that wasn't the healthiest world of all. We're talking the years of Studio 54 in New York City, the advent of the supermodel. And what I wanted at that age, not only was it to be a great photographer, I just wanted to be around all the models. So that meant living a relatively fast New York City lifestyle. And I wasn't all that happy. I wasn't all that well. Physically, I wasn't feeling well. And I think one of the main problems that was affecting me at that time was chronic migraine headaches. And just like many people that get into this field, they have an epiphany. I began to look at a migraine headache, not the way that my parents did, both of which were migraine headache sufferers, but more like, is there an option outside of taking medication? Now, my mother used to take a migraine medication called Cafragot. Cafragot was meant to be used maybe 2-3 times a year to get rid of a really bad migraine. Mom used to take 2 or 3 a day, and she did for years. And I remember speaking to a neurologist back in the early 70s about my migraine headaches. I couldn't believe that at that age, right out of college, and this possibility to work for a fashion beauty photographer, I was doomed to actually be taking Cafragot. And somebody that was a dear friend of mine back then took me to a health food store. There were 3 health food stores in New York then. Whole Foods was decades away from existing. And we looked around, and I was kind of like taken by it all and fascinated while I was smoking a cigarette. And one of the books stood out for me. It was called The Miracle of Fasting by Paul Bragg. And my buddy picked it up and he said, you should read this. And I did. I took it home, and I found it to be something kind of like science fiction. Like, this can't be true. Like, you don't eat and you run better, and you don't eat, you just drink water, and you can reduce inflammation and arthritis and psoriasis and on and on and on. It just sounded unbelievable to me. And I tried it. I decided in the middle of a blazing migraine to actually lock myself in my room, which is what I typically did. But I didn't take a Cafragot. I didn't drink coffee. I didn't eat anything with sugar. All I did was just rest for a couple of days, drinking a lot of water. And when I came out of it, I felt really clear. I didn't have the typical migraine hangover. And like it is for many people, you have this moment that's an epiphany. That was my epiphany. And I wondered, you know, if not eating could get rid of a migraine in that manner, you know, what does this mean? And Paul Bragg, so that the audience knows, was at that time, back in the early 70s, in his 90s, in his mid 90s, very robust, very healthy, very unusual man. And I think he died swimming. He drowned actually in Hawaii.
Yeah, he was surfing. He was surfing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and then I read all of Paul Bragg's books, and that led me to a number of other ways of thinking. I started to study macrobiotics to see how that would affect me. Raw foodism. I got very interested in the work of the Hippocrates Institute when I was in Boston. So I started growing a lot of my own food, and in my small studio bedroom in New York City. And people thought I'd lost my marbles. I was growing sprouts in my apartment. I had a wheatgrass juicer. I had a little enema bag. And to this day, I just still can't quite believe that I had that much curiosity and interest in that lifestyle. To this day, I remember that I had gone a couple of months without a migraine, and I knew at that point that I was onto something. So it began like that. Even though I was very fascinated with photography, and I thought I'd wind up being one of the world's top fashion photographers. Of course, you know, thinking this stuff in your head when you're young and ambitious. I was really bitten by the possibility that diet could have an impact on how I felt. I'd never felt that well and that happy once I started fasting. One thing led to another, and I got pulled into running. I had a dear friend of mine who had lived in South America and was running with Indians in Peru on the beaches, and he came back to New York City, and he was like a god. He was glowing. He looked terrific, and all of us were up there visiting him. You know, he traveled through South America as we were all smoking Marlboro Reds. And I asked him, I said, you know, like what are you doing? And he said to me, you know, with a little bit of arrogance, well, I'm running. And I said, what's that? He says, why don't you join me on the FDR Drive on Franklin Delano Roosevelt East Side Drive tomorrow. So the following morning, I woke up, I lit up a Marlboro, I put on a pair of Keds. I went and I met him, and I lasted, I think, maybe 10 minutes. And being as competitive as I was, I did not want my best friend to run quicker and faster than I did. So I started to run little by little, and that was the beginning of the rest of my life. Subsequent to that, I did my first marathon in 1979. And then I've done, you know, about another half dozen marathons, several ultra marathons, 100 miles or more, and never looked back. Everything to me was a function of, can it make me a better runner? Can I recover quicker? You know, how do I continue to pursue these states of mind where I just had great equanimity, peace of mind? Little did I know about the neurology of running. You know, and today I think about the brain. In fact, I think about the brain a great deal, and all the things that actually affect the ecology of the brain. But that's kind of like the way that it began. We've had 40 years in between that you and I could talk about.
That's super interesting how I think a lot of people forget that the 70s culture was, hey, everybody was smoking Marlboros and looking cool and being, of course, in the pressures of the hip scene. Before we get into the specifics, what were some of the things that maybe the social pressures or something that you might have been on, what we were talking about, that fast-paced lifestyle, and then you're making these, as you would say, these kind of obtuse, weird adjustments. What was it like from the feedback from your friends? Were they positive to it? Did they think you were crazy, or were they kind of curious about what you were doing?
No, nobody was curious. Everybody thought I'd lost my marbles. You know, like I remember telling a dear friend of mine, who was a very famous photographer at the time, same thing. You know, what do you mean you're running? What is that? You know, as he's taking a hit off a joint. You know, and then from there, I walked him over to the first health food store that I'd been to, and I showed it to him, and he couldn't stop laughing. You know, as many people did. And if you wanted to know anything about anything, you went to the public library. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. There was nothing. So I spent a lot of time at the New York City Public Library, trying to figure all this stuff out. Who were runners? You know, what do Olympic athletes do to train? I was just completely taken by elite sports performance, as I am today.
That's fascinating. I know Matt and I both kind of cut our teeth in those worlds and have what I'd say a cooperative competitive arrangement. So I really appreciate when you can have a friend that can help push you or explore ideas or things that you might try or the other person can try, and then you kind of coax. I think a lot of people that's lost, everybody's kind of stuck in their dogma.
Very true.
I want to get to the cognitive health later on, but I would like to see what you mean by this holographic model of nutrition and anti-aging. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and how that works and how you've defined that particular definition?
You know, there's so many aspects to a life. I mean, it's not like you just flip the health switch on and everything goes on. You know, you flip it off and you become someone that's out there debauching, you know, drinking or smoking or being unconscious about what it is that you eat. What I mean about holographic is that you take all things into consideration. And anytime that I'm working with anybody, what I want is to know just about everything regarding their life. And when we're talking about holographic, it means that you start to quantify things. How much do you sleep? How well do you sleep? What's your sleep environment? You know, and make that the scaffolding on which everything else falls onto. Sleep being a superpower that I think very few people understand. On top of that, you're looking at nutrition. On top of that, you're looking at exercise. On top of that, you're looking at mindfulness. On top of that, you're looking at nature. So you're getting a holographic, you know, I'd say pyramid. And no matter which angle you switch it around and look at it, you're going to see something new that's going to offer you a better quality life. In the end, I suspect that what most people want is to be happy, is to have peace of mind, and to have equanimity. And if each one of these levels are left out, or you're not paying attention to them, like you think you can get away with 3, 4, 5 hours sleep, like can I hack sleep? As though that were true. You know, can I get away with a certain amount of alcohol every week if you know, I take certain amount of supplements, or, you know, I just run a little bit more the way that we used to when we were a lot younger. You know, if there's a way that I can avoid being mindful, you know, not looking at meditation from a secular point of view, something that can actually make my brain think better, can calm me down, can get me off the balcony, can actually make me a more productive executive, can make me much more thoughtful and grateful about the kind of life that I have. So holographic, that you're thinking not about how you're going to make the next, you know, 100 mil, but really what you're thinking about is how do I commodify peace of mind? How do I commodify happiness? And those things then take over in terms of what's really valuable in this world. You know, we're looking at a kind of breakdown in our culture that's been, you know, completely revealed by dealing with the coronavirus, where you've got this incredible amount of inequality, and you've got people at the top layers of wealth and those at the bottom, and you wonder what's the point in the end of having a fortune of about 100 million or more and keeping it for yourself, you know, as though you could take it with you when you die. With the exception of people like Gates and the people that he's brought into his community, Warren Buffett and so on, where they're going to give it all away, and they're going to give it all away so that humanity is better off for them having come through this world. So I think that how it is that you set your value system up in mindfulness and work at that, not meditating only to like quiet your mind, but meditate so that you expand it and become a contribution to this world.
Beautifully said. I've been a passionate explorer of the meditation field. And it's funny that you mentioned sleep as one of the foundational scaffolds. Matt, the co-founder of our company, might have a few comments about that, because maybe you can share some notes, because he's probably as deeply involved in sleep technology and sleep science and all that sort of stuff. So Matt, do you have any particular questions you kind of like to go down the sleep story? Because I think it's an area that a lot of people struggle. When I go to New York, I can't sleep at all. And like, I'm just up all the time. And I can remember staying at one of the hotels there, and I came down to the lobby and the Chelsea. I went to the Chelsea because it's kind of like, you got to go experience that, right?
Of
And
course.
I remember coming down to the lobby at 3:30 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. And I said to the clerk at the front, I said, and there's all these people in the lobby. I said, like, does anybody sleep in this city? And he's like, I moved here 18 years ago. I haven't slept since. And so, Matt, anything that you'd like to kind of inquire or share with us on sleeping?
Yeah, first of all, it's great to hear you say sleep is a superpower, because I agree. One of the things I think about a lot is like, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that someone can do that will expand their performance, their aesthetics, and their health? And I think sleep is arguably number 1 or number 2. I'd love to dive into, I guess, all of the sleep strategies and hacks that you've gotten. I've got my list and I'm sure you've got yours. So again, let's say a client comes in, they've got poor sleep, they're not maybe sleeping well. Because I used to be one of these guys that slept 8, 9 hours and woke up dehydrated and foggy. And then when I started tracking my sleep, I realized, well, I was getting 0 to 15 minutes of deep sleep. And that led me on a crazy journey to optimize it. And now getting, an hour to 2 hours of deep, a couple hours of REM. I just love to hear what your strategies are around sleep and optimizing REM and deep.
Well, Matt, are you wearing an Oura ring? Okay, all right. So I think it begins with quantifying your sleep. You got to know everything about your sleep possible, so that then you can reverse engineer from there. In the absence of having either that, I think I also even have the Fitbit Ultra that I experimented with to see what's going to give me the best data on my sleep. Once you're able to break that down and see for yourself what's really occurring, then you can begin to correct your environment so that what you're practicing is sleep hygiene. Very few people understand what that means. Everybody's got their cell phone, it's still on, it's 9 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, you're on their cell phone. They don't know that they have a filter on the phone that could actually flip off blue light, but what the fuck? So they're gonna keep that off, and that's actually altering what's going on in their brain. So there's 2 problems when you go to sleep if you've got a cell phone. One is the device itself is a problem. Secondarily is the content that's coming out of the device. And now we know that if you sleep with your phone on nearby, and I'm sure you know this, Matt, that's one of the things that then causes for greater disturbed sleep. You can actually see it on your Oura Ring app the next day. You're going to see how much it affected your HRV in particular. So making sure that your cell phone is off hours before you go to bed. I've made that a habit. It took me a long time because I was very habituated to having the news on in the background and staying up till whatever hours watching MSNBC or CNBC and what are the markets doing and what's going on, as though all of that really mattered. And once I cut sleep out, once I cut off late night TV or having the TV on just for the sake of having it on, then I began to understand the ways that all these kinds of energies will affect you in terms of being able to fall asleep, have good quality sleep, and wake up rested. So cutting off all electronic equipment for hours before. I have sun balanced lights in my room, so it's either mimicking the sun going down or the sun going up, and I'll typically read for a while. If not, I'm going to use different devices that I think are really quite remarkable. So I do use a new Calm sometimes about an hour or 2 before to kind of like put me in the right headspace. I may use a Muse and work with Muse for a while. So I'm using one device or another most days, not every day, but most days, to actually put me in, I'd say, a state of alpha, right? So that little by little, that can flip me over into good deep delta. And for the public that's listening, they got to know that the brain produces different brain waves at different frequencies, and they're related to different chemicals within the brain. When you and I are in beta, that's when we're wide awake. We're on a cup of coffee or two in the morning, and we're ready to take on the world. Yeah, beta, and adrenaline junkies. When it's too high is where people get overpowered by the levels of dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol from their adrenals, and that's where getting anxious. Anxiety comes in. So those are the chemicals that you want to keep down under control, so that when you go to bed, you're in alpha, right? And you can doze off, and then quickly doze off into a good deep sleep, right? And that can be measured. Make sure that your bedroom is like a bear cave. You've heard this a million times. You're going to hear this from all the best biohackers that there are. And keep your room cool, which was completely opposite to what I used to think. In the winters, always you kept your heaters on. Now I keep my room at about 64, 60, around 64 pretty much when I go to bed. So those are some of the things that work in terms of helping me sleep better and wake up refreshed. I also do intermittent fasting, where I skip dinner about twice a week. So my last meal will be about 3 o'clock, and then I'll sleep on an empty stomach. And you sleep deeper, better. HRV levels go up. The quality of your deep sleep, the amount of time that you're in deep, where your body repairs itself better, runs at about, for me, for about an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 40 minutes. So skipping dinner turns out to be really terrific. And now that we're pretty much quarantined, it's not all that difficult to go to bed earlier, and do all these things that work for me in terms of my biology. Tell me some of yours.
Well, I think you hit some of the key ones. One of them is, again, slowing down the brain waves. I've spent over $100,000 on doing neurofeedback, and Wade's a huge fan as well. We just did a week in February. And I believe that alpha helps release serotonin, and serotonin's part of the melatonin cycle.
Correct.
So I think if you can get into alpha an hour or two before bed, and again, control the lights and do all the things you discussed, you're going to get serotonin and then activate the melatonin, just get a much better prolactin cycle. So love that you're doing that, and the devices you talked about, like New Calm, can really help people achieve that. And I've seen similar data, like Wade and I are fasting 3 times a week for 36 hours, so basically 3 36-hour fasting. Yes. And my HRV improves, my heart rate drops every time. The only people I've seen the exception to that are people with Mediterranean genetics, like my friend Jay, and it's just a nutrigenomic thing where their bodies get stressed out when they fast, which is an interesting little exception. But by the way, as far as getting good data, there's a headset called Dream, DREEM, and it measures the EEG. So in terms of actually measuring deep and REM accurately, it's a lot more accurate than the Aura. I've compared it to, I've talked to a few people that have, and it's just more accurate to really delineate between the deep and the REM. But
nice. You can actually throw in there too, Matt, the new Muse, the Muse S, actually also does a really good job of tracking. I'm surprised at how good that one has turned out to be. Please go ahead.
Nice. No, I think you can hit all those key points. Anything do you do around mattresses? And by the way, speaking of temperature, are you a fan of the Chili Pad or their new Uller?
Oh yeah, in fact I have the Ebb. So I use a Wade blanket, right? I use Ebb. So Ebb is a device that actually cools your forehead. And what it does is it runs a cool liquid through a tube that's attached to a mask, but the mask doesn't go on your eyes, it goes in your forehead. And it knocks you, it just knocks you into the sleep zone. It really quiets your thinking down a lot, and it cools your head temperature by about 2-3 degrees. So you sleep a lot better, and you can put it on a timer, and off you go. So that's a really, really cool tool. I like it. If I'm overdoing it, if I've done too much late night work, and it's kind of like, you got to stop, I'll pop that on. And then there's certain nutrients that I'll use, certain nutraceuticals that work extremely well, that actually protect your brain. But the first line of effect is actually kicking you into good quality sleep. So I may use L-serine, I'll use glycine, I'll use magnesium threonate, I'll use 5-HTP with that, I'll use ashwagandha, I'll use bacopa. So I make a little cocktail. And I haven't missed that cocktail in maybe a year or two. So every now and then I throw a little bit more of one thing or another. Some people do really well with melatonin. I never really did well with it, so I had to figure out some other pathways. Yeah, there you go. And by using these particular nutrients with everything else, it's unbelievable. For many of your listeners, the products that I mentioned, not in the absence of everything else, but if you put everything else together and you use these supplements, the effects are really quite profound.
Yeah, I've never heard of the ebb, so I'm going to check that and buy it probably as soon as we finish here.
You got to look it up. You got to look it up.
But I saw similar data. I've got what's called the cryo helmet, where you put this thing in the freezer and you put it on. It's kind of designed for injuries, but
really?
when I would cool my whole head, and sometimes even wearing ice vests before bed, my deep sleep would go up a lot. And I've shared that with other biohackers that have seen similar data. So, but I've never heard of the ebb.
Yeah, the ebb is really cool. I think you'd enjoy it. There are two other things that we should mention here. One is extreme hot baths about an hour before you go to bed, reduces systemic inflammation, but based on the work of and studies of somebody like Rhonda Patrick and Peter Attia, they had a really good back and forth on an episode with him on the drive, where she actually came out and talked about the studies that are being done on extreme hot baths, reducing inflammation within the brain. And that's why hot baths actually work so well at helping you sleep better. For some people, it's the reverse. It's actually cooling their bodies down. Do an ice bath, go do cryotherapy. Not everybody's going to go do that, but a cold bath is inexpensive enough. You need to just be a little bit more courageous to do it. And one or the other or both, doing a contrast, hot, cold, can also put you into a deep state of relaxation.
Love it.
That's some super good stuff. We'll put some links here in the show notes for people who want to jump on some of those things. Leading into that sleep thing, you referred to something that both Matt and I are super passionate about, and that is cognitive health. And of course, with so many,
sure.
I mean, if you look at the data of what's happening to people's cognitive decline as they get over, this is an area that I think everybody really needs to put some focus on early in life before they get into some degenerative process. And also, you mentioned something which is really where we're at, which is the expansion of awareness and mindfulness through various practices. Tell us how you kind of got into that, and what have you noticed, and what are some things that you think or you're excited about in that particular area? Because we're both super passionate about this area. And now the tech is getting better and better and better to kind of monitor your feedback. Or people said I couldn't meditate before, but now there's all these devices and there's everything you can imagine. So I'd like to hear what your insights are there.
Well, just to jump off your shoulders on that one, Wade. Yeah, you can get devices now that will meditate you. So you can cut a lot of the work out. In other words, you can hack meditation. There's several terrific courses that you can do. Asprey created 40 Years of Zen, which is one of the best deep dives I've done in being able to hack meditation. Not everybody could do it, but it is absolutely fascinating. And
have you been to 40 years? Have you been to 40 Years of Zen?
Oh yeah, I did. I did it almost 3 years ago.
Yeah. By the way, I think we've got a bunch of the records from Zen. I think I've been the most. I've been 5 times, but
Whoa.
Our group, I think, has all the records. Not me personally. I've got the records on the Spider Cap, but whether it was delta waves or gamma waves or whatever waves. So we've really optimized that to the nth degree. And Wade just came for the first time a couple months ago. It was just a blast. So we're huge fans of what Dave's created.
Terrific.
He's taken it to the next level. So God bless Dave.
And from there I learned about Biocybernaut, and I did that. That's Jim Hart out of University of California.
Yeah, I did that twice. I did Biocybernaut twice before I went to 40 years of Zen. So
wait a minute. So what did you do? Double alpha?
Yeah, I was actually the first. I was the first premium double training they ever did. I was one of the experimental guys to go for it because I had a background in meditation. And I got a lot out of Dr. Hart's process. And of course, he's like one of the OGs that fought through the ban on it and everything else. And then kind of Dave, took it down his route. And then there's been a whole bunch of spin-offs. I think has been fascinating. The one thing I would say though, what was unusual for me is most people have an alpha as the driving wave, which for me, I had a meditation practice for about 20 years. I was actually, my meditation practice is a gamma practice, which they weren't measuring it Biocybernaut. But when I went to 40 years, the neuroscientist, Dr. Drew, who was looking at my waves, he said, "You're actually inverted. So let's just start skewing you over here in gamma." And literally in 1 week, I think it accelerated my meditation practice at least 10 or 15 years. And I got to experience some things you read about, like these transcendental states that you read about from mystics and stuff. And you go, I don't know if that's true. Well, I now know for an absolute fact that is, it's an experiential reality for me. And so I encourage people, but enough about me. What about you? How did you get into this, and what did you find, and how do you suggest or integrate it in kind of your holistic picture for producing optimal health?
It's kind of like I said, I don't want to say that because I put that at the top that of this pyramid, that it's at least important. I think that if you're not being introspective in some manner, certainly through meditative practices, and if you put your foot to the pedal and you're doing something accelerated like 40 years of Zen or Biocybernaut or any of the spin-offs, what you're actually doing is you're accelerating your own development. You're able to actually think about your own thinking in ways that you can enjoy greater peace of mind, like I said earlier, and touch on happiness, right? So for me, given that we're living through a very difficult moment, thank goodness that I've been doing the meditations that I've been doing for quite a while. I'm sure that the both of you feel the same way. There are people that in the absence of being able to go quiet are suffering needlessly. Right. So what happens when you're not balanced out and you're not being cautious and certainly having time to quiet the voice in your head, what Stephen Kotler calls your inner Woody Allen, then what happens is that can go on its own and talk you into, a bottle or 2 or 3 of wine. God else knows what you're going to dive into. And before you know it, you're suffering more. So when you're looking at being somewhat in control, right? Being in control of your neurology rather than your neurology being in control of you, running you, with the paranoia and the fear and the over concern about what's going to happen. That the point of being able to use all of this material is to also bring it back to this moment. And that can sound very trite unless people understand that there's a great amount of science around that, where right now our conversation is compelling to the point where nothing more matters than this moment with the both of you. And we could look at so much in terms of the science of the brain now, all the great neuroscientists that are blogging and having podcasts going, and Sam Harris, who would have known that Sam Harris has been meditating for 20, 30 years, for heaven's sakes, and has got one of the best meditation apps in the world. So all of it was really on my pursuit at a certain point as I turned 63 and 64 was, okay, so what else is there? right? Like I can't run like I used to. I can't do Bikram like I used to. There, you know, like I need to be a lot more cautious. Like, what's the next frontier? And the next frontier, and the way that it presented itself was, how about we tackle the brain? What about meditation is worth listening to? What's Zen meditation? And I think when you get people's curiosity up and going, they can't get enough of it. The fact that they can sit still for a while and journal and actually put down what's meaningful in terms of what they want to achieve, goals, even in this time. If you can set up goals just for the day, right, instead of worrying about the next 20 years, all of these constitute mindful practices where your brain actually functions better. You build a better brain, you produce more BDNF, you're actually making more brain-derived neuronal factor from all these things that you're doing. So you can keep your brain operating pretty much in kind of a timeless zone. Like, it just doesn't age. And it's not a panacea. It's not like, hey, if you follow all this stuff. Well, the fact is, if you do follow all this stuff, we know that exercise is going to make your brain stay relevant. We know that eating a certain diet that's rich in certain fats, a certain kind of protein, and so on, is going to affect your thinking and your brain. We know that intermittent fasting or fasting is going to also generate new neurons, BDNF, you know, DNF, and also the quality of your thinking. So when you put it all together, it's not like you can separate one from the other. We do know that when you're sleeping and you're in deep sleep, you know, you're consolidating memories, your body's producing all the hormones that repair your body, growth hormone in particular. So it's holographic. Whichever point you're looking at, you know, this pyramid from, each one's feeding into the other, and at the end, you're getting a better brain. That's just one of the things that comes of it.
Beautifully said, and I love how you kind of illustrated what you mean by the holographic perspective that you developed. Where do you see, because cognitive health is such a big topic and continues to expand, what are some of the things or practices or things that you've incorporated in your life or that of your clients that you felt has been most effective for people who might have struggled, or people who may have hit a wall in their progress and they had those breakthroughs, such as, like, you know, going to these, for example, when I went to both Biocybernaut and 40 Years of Zen, it really made a very quick level up, which might have taken me years. Was it literally?
Yes.
What are some of the hacks, if you will, or tricks or things that you found that for people who are struggling or people who are at a plateau?
I would recommend right off the bat to read James Clear's book, you know, Atomic Habits, and to go on and on and on about, you know, you got to make new habits, you got to, you know, get up earlier, you got to, you know, turn your TV set off. It can come across as a bunch of techniques rather than a process that you enter into because you're aware that there's something that you want that maybe you can't quite put your finger on, but if you follow it, you're going to find at the end of it a better you, a more authentic you, a more sincere you. So for me, it begins with morning routines. Whether I want to get up at 5:30 in the morning or not, I just do it. You know, it's just fell into the habit after a while. If I'm not watching late night news, and if you're in New York, you're a news junkie. You know, you've got the New York Times open in the morning, you got Daily Beats going on your phone, the Financial Times show up at my door, and you're consumed with this. And in the background, you've got Morning Joe going. So before it's 6 a.m. or 6:30, you're hyper, you're overstimulated, you're worrying, and you're chewing your nails down to the nub because you're being bombarded with nothing useful. You know, if you skip the news for a while, and I mean for a while, if you're able to just maybe check in a little bit, you know, grab a little bit of the news here and there, or not. So we do have, you know, friends and clients detox from the news, take a 10-day detox. And it is near impossible for them to do it. They've got to see if they can go off and cheat a little bit and get a little bit of the news about where the market is and so on. And they don't realize it until they've done it for, like, you know, a couple of weeks. It's kind of like This is a detox. Like I've been on a water fast for a week or so, and the effects are profound on my thinking. How it is that I'm thinking about the future, how it is that I'm thinking about the past, if you're thinking about it at all. Right. So morning routines are critical, that you get up, that you've got different routines that I'd say are laid out very well by James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. You know, James Clear, and he's all over YouTube, went to play ball one day. That's all he wanted to do was be a good, ball player in high school. And the guy that was up in front of him lost control of the bat, and the bat went right into James' skull, cracked the skull open. And that was it for him for the season. And he began to think about what it would take for him to actually go back to play ball again. And by the end of his senior year in high school, he was voted best athlete. He didn't go on to deal with sports at all after that. He's become one of the world's greatest authorities on how do you build, new habits. And I find the book to be super entertaining, enthralling. And you know that if you can do just a little bit new every day, just 1% different than the day before, where are you going to be in a year, right? You don't need to go to Equinox and bust your balls, working out on the big machines after you haven't worked out in 6 months and think that, okay, and then you're like dying for a couple of days. Why not just start easy with a bunch of bands at home? Why not go for a walk? Right? Why not listen to good podcasts on the way to work? Why not skip the bus or the train or the driver and build up atomic little tiny little habits every day. And what you find is that after a while, you're doing things that you never would have thought you'd do. And that I think is a very useful way to go about becoming more of who you want to become in the end anyway.
James is a good friend of mine, and his book is awesome. Definitely recommend everybody pick it up and read it and apply it.
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes, as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's masszymes.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Some questions around your approach with your clients around supplements and food in regards to brain performance and optimization. Would love to hear what your stacks are for different situations for clients that are maybe executives, high performers, mental.
Sure. This could be a whole other show, guys, like where we break down like all the supplement stacks that I think are really useful. For the brain, there are a number of things that I find to be really quite profound. I love acetylated carnitine. So there's a version called acetylcarnitine arginate, and you feel it pretty quickly. There's a feel to it, and there's a lot of information on its effects, also building back aspects of the brain. It also, most of the products that I'm going to talk about do produce BDNF, brain-derived neuronal factor. So wherever I can get more of that stuff, I want it. Acetyl-L-carnitine, I think, is terrific. I mentioned earlier for sleep, L-serine, which is an amino acid. But L-serine also has hyperprotective effects over the brain. So not only do you sleep better, but it also protects your brain from the onslaught of dementia. There's studies being done with it regularly now to protect against the encroachment of Alzheimer's. You know, there's a lot that you can do in that regard, but I think that that's one of the better products overall. I love a product that was developed in Russia called Picamelon. So Picamelon is a combination, and it can be purchased here in the U.S., is a combination of niacin bound to a GABA molecule.
Wow, so the niacin's driving it into the brain a little better. Is that how it's working?
Yeah, absolutely, and you feel it pretty quickly too. It's very soothing. Same thing. It's one of the best things that I found in order to think clearer, and it also aids in sleeping too, because of the amount of GABA that's in, and niacin is going to help you sleep a little bit better too. So whether you use it in the daytime or you use it before bed, I think it's absolutely terrific. The amounts are going to vary, right? And that depends on the individual and what they understand about Picamelon. Picamelon is really quite dramatic for its overall mood enhancing effects. I love small dose piracetam. I think piracetam is a nootropic. Not high amounts. I'm not looking to hype myself up, but certainly when I'm working and I've got a big project in front of me, or I need to do some intensive writing, a little bit of piracetam and a racetam, which is within the racetam family, I like a lot because it also reduces anxiety, goes right to the right hemisphere, and so you're a lot more creative with it.
It took some this morning. I'm a huge fan of aniracetam. I've tried all the racetams. Well,
it's
most
terrific.
Of them.
It's terrific.
I love the verbal fluency. I mean, like in 10 minutes, you just speak more fluently, which is great for podcasts.
It's great. Yeah, and it puts in a really good mood. Phosphatidylserine, I think is terrific. Choline, phosphatidylcholine. So that whole family. I also like DMAE. DMAE in very small amounts. The DMAE is classified as kind of like a B vitamin.
Mm-hmm.
Wade, do you want to add to that?
No, I was going to ask you, how are you using the DMAE?
I take about 5 milligrams sublingual. Very, very mild. Same thing. It has an effect on the prefrontal cortex. Very good for focus and thinking. It also has protective properties overall on the human brain. If I was to wade, no pun intended, into the mushroom field for a moment, of course, things like lion's mane, which I think is terrific, chaga. There are a couple of others there that we could talk about. So I tend to have a certain brew that has also curcumin, and that's also a great lift in terms of how I get my morning going. I love anandamide. Anandamide is a chemical that we produce. It's related to endorphins, and typically you can get anandamide in chocolate. So there are different companies that produce anandamide chocolate, and at nighttime, if you want to have something to kind of like calm you down and chill you out, I'll boil a cup of almond milk. I'll put a teaspoon or two of anandamide in there, maybe some curcumin, a little bit of stevia, and it feels like you're having a terrific cup of hot chocolate before you go to bed, but it's doing wonders for your brain. So those are a few things that I would recommend.
Is there any particular brand of the anandamide chocolate that you would recommend?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you right now. I think I'm out of it. If you do a search online, you're going to find that there's one company in particular that makes anandamide. Just one.
We'll check that. We'll check back in the show notes and then cross-reference after to make sure that we got the right one, because we want people feeling good when they brew up their concoction. It's always I always find it fascinating how virtually everybody we bring onto the show, or people that kind of gone to the highest levels like you have, they kind of have these kind of little ritualistic things that they do, which maybe took them years to figure out, which have profound effects when people would try them on their own. So,
right. And I've been experimenting with different things for the brain for years. I think for the brain also, I would recommend something like bromontane. Bromontane is a very novel molecule, but one of the things that it does is it also improves focus, sharpness of mind. By the way, I don't take all of these things all at once. Depending on my mood in the day, I may, combine a number of them. I'm at this now for so long that I can pretty much determine what's going to serve me best on a particular day. I think also for many people that are dealing with mood disorders, L-carnosine, not L-carnitine, but L-carnosine works really, really well, as does uridine. I think uridine is extremely well studied for its effects also. I'm building a better brain on alleviating, I want to be careful how I say this, let's say moodiness overall, but it's a powerful mood lifter and it helps you sleep a lot better too. So though, we could talk for, for quite a while on any number of nutrients. There's so many more out there that I love.
Have you gone down the peptide rabbit hole on any level yet?
Yeah, I rotate through about 24 that I think, for different reasons, I'm using them. I'm very big now on thymosin alpha-1 for its overprotective effect on the human body immunologically, and its effects on protecting the lungs, certainly now. So we do recommend thymosin alpha-1. I think it's terrific. Because I'm a little bit older than the both of you, in order to conserve muscle, in order to conserve power, in order to maintain myself in as good shape as possible, I use 2 other peptides, GHRP2, GHRP6. That stands actually for growth hormone releasing peptide. So rather than actually being growth hormone, which we wouldn't touch in a million years, the GHRP peptides themselves do a great deal of building, almost like a surrogate body. And the effects are remarkable, both in terms of your brain, your body, your musculature, etc.
Do you prefer those over ipamorelin and CGC? Have you tried both?
I have, and I actually love MK677.
I mean, if you want to get hungry, if you got appetite problems, there's the answer, folks, right there.
There you go. But there are ways that I can get around that one, Wade. But this one I find to be really good for me. Ipamorelin, I've used. I may go on and off it periodically. Certain things tend to go flat on me. Some others don't. I love C-Lank. I love C-Max. I love Apidolon. Apidolon, I can't recommend enough. Certainly as you're getting into your 40s, 50s, and later, people talk about like life extension. What's one of your secrets? Well, Apidolon actually protects the chromosome itself and actually makes the telomeres repair and grow back. So Apidolon is breathtaking, for age reversal, making sure that you don't go infirm. That's way up there on my list of peptides.
Yeah, I found that it helped my sleep quite a bit, and I'm about to do another 10-day cycle next few days of Apidolon.
I'm really happy to hear that. Apidolon helps with sleep tremendously. That's fantastic.
By the way, I'm a huge fan I've become a huge fan of cerebral lysine, which was discovered in Russia. And not that I did the tailor-made stuff, but to do the doses that I wanted to do. And by the way, they don't make it anymore. There's a company making it out of Austria. But on the last Zen training where we pushed the volume of training to the max, it was the smoothest recovery I've ever experienced. I was trying
to see if I could. Yeah, I was trying to see if I could find it. I wanted to show it. Cerebral lysine is manufactured in Austria.
Yeah.
And tailor-made, makes their own version of it, but it's not that difficult to procure. And not that I discovered it, but I discovered it for myself the first time back in 1998. I gave a lecture in Vienna, And I was actually lecturing along with a number of individuals throughout Europe that at that point were leaders in anti-aging. God only knows if they're still alive or not. But one of the exhibitors at the lecture was cerebral lysine, and they sent me, I don't know, about 50 boxes at that time to New York. I don't know how it got through customs, but I absolutely love it. You know, and the studies on it are like, you know, really quite remarkable. They've done so much research on its effects on rebuilding the spinal cord, being able to regenerate, you know, brain tissue from severe impact to the head. And then beyond that, for people that are healthy, I can't recommend it enough. Really terrific product.
When I stacked it with Cortexin,
there you go.
It was probably the most profound thing I've tried for the brain. Now you got to respect the dose on Cortexin. It's quite powerful. So you have to, in my opinion, start slow and build up to see what works for you. But that combo is pretty magical.
I would think so. You got to do the same thing with cerebral lysine. The first time that I got it, I shot myself with a 10 milligram vial, and that I didn't have a good day after that. You know, then I learned, you know, to cut it all the way back and, you know, kind of work my way up with it. But cerebral lysine is really quite remarkable. Certainly as you get older, I think for people that are already suffering with dementia, people that are having, you know, I lost my key moments, would do very, very well with cerebral lysine. We do use it and rotate it with our family of IVs, and it goes in really smooth. So cerebral lysine is just terrific in maintaining yourself youthful.
This is an awesome conversation. I'm really enjoying it. So I want to dive into a couple other things related to it. So a lot of people are kind of entering into the peptide equation. They're looking at hormones. They're looking at natural hormones. So what would you say, because you kind of made a reference to this in other areas of, hey, start out with these atomic habits, as opposed to I see some people going, hey, I'm just going to take a mosh pit of these things. So where would you say as a person, maybe relative to the clients, because, you know, a client at 20 is going to be different than a client at 60. Yeah. But particularly related to anti-aging, I would say most people start to look at this maybe in their 40s if they're the high performer types, because there's a definite decline and that's not acceptable, and people start freaking out. But where would you say how you step up that ladder? Because I noticed you talked about plant-based phytohormones, natural hormone pharmaceuticals. We talked about peptides. Maybe we could get into any of the other tools that you might use in the toolbox, or the sequencing, because I think this is really important with what someone like you does. And that is, you're able to take this person from a holographic component and say, here's the foundational components that we've got to get squared away first. These are the missing points that we've got to fill in. And now we're going to get into the accelerators or the reverse aging stuff. So tell us how you kind of would what stages do you think that people could start integrating this, obviously with the observational components of an expert like yourself?
I'm very careful where I begin. So it's not like I'm going to hit somebody with all the stuff right away. You know, if ever I get around to any of these things, you know, working with a client, and certainly with anybody who's curious that's watching the show, that's just going to lose it. You know, like, well, what do I start with? What do I do? You know, where do I get cerebral lysine? It's more how it is that you can move people, again, to talk about James Clear, through stages, so that somebody is trusting enough, you know, is a good enough sport that what they're going to do is work with you, and you're gonna gather enough intelligence about the individual, so that hopefully, based on your experience, what you can do is begin crafting the best path for this individual to begin to clean up their life. We do a lot of intelligence gathering up front. So blood work is really critical. There are ways that we look at blood work so that I get the information that I need, not just doing a CBC and saying everything's fine. I want to know what's really going on based on the news, what's coming off the blood work. And we dive real deep, but we dive into your hormones, so that we can get a sense of, you know, where you may be being thwarted there or being empowered there. I get as much of a full picture as I can. We're going to do genetic testing, but I'm not going towards, I don't want to malign 23andMe, but there are other companies that I think give us gene information and epigenetic information that's going to be very relevant in terms of making decisions about which way I go. So of course, an interview, of course, working with the person and determining what their goals may be, having my lab and my doctors do the blood work that we require, doing the gene test, and then getting the best picture possible. And with that information, trying to find out from you, you know, if you're honest enough, what is it that you want? You know, what are you looking for? And inside of that, in a very cooperative manner, in a somewhat of a transactional manner, so you've got all of that, like I was saying, in a transactional manner, and I would say, Wade, in a very cooperative manner, is to begin to put a guideline, a protocol together for a person, not this cookie cutter approach where, you know, you're going to go on keto, you're going to go on a detox, you're going to, you know, start doing water fasting. There's no way that I'm going to come to any kind of intense pathway. Rather, I want to start real easy, you know, little atomic habits in terms of, can you give up coffee? You know, how much coffee you drink? You're drinking 4 cups of coffee. Can you cut it down to 2? And for a lot of people, there's no sense of what's the difference. Well, wait a minute, I've been drinking 4 cups of coffee for 20 years. You know, but when you're looking at their LDL and you're looking at liver enzyme levels and you're listening to how anxious they are, drinking the first cup of coffee with 10 milligrams of Xanax in the morning, and they've got $1 billion in the bank. There's a problem here.
That's
you know,
hilarious.
there's a problem here. And so I think cultivating relationship with somebody is of extreme importance in building up trust. So I'll work with my clients through different stages, and hopefully they'll stick around long enough. But I get a very good idea at the beginning of what a roadmap is going to be based on all the intelligence I gather up front, what's my client's goals, and get to know the person very carefully. So it's not in any way at all a medical model, although we do rely on medicine for certain things.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people have to recognize is for most of the medical models, there simply isn't enough time, and there's not enough whole picture components to really do your self-service. It's generally, hey, if you're low in testosterone, take maybe testosterone replacement therapy and come back and see me in a month and we'll do some blood work, where there's a lot of things that you can accelerate. What are some of the areas? So let's talk about your typical 40 to 50, you know, that 40 to 50-year-old, you know, let's say I take a male, and we'll take a male version and we'll take a female version. You can kind of walk us through something. So you got a typical male, he's an executive, you know, been burning it for a lot of years, start to notice sex drives down, muscle mass is down, he's putting on some body fat, and he's starting to see some slippage in his brain function. He's not as sharp, or he's losing his edge. What's a typical, assuming that he's doing, like, he's going to the gym, he's eating right, he's doing all those things, but he just doesn't have that extra pop hormonally or whatever. And then we'll do a same version with the female. So let's start with the male first and see what would be a typical pathway that you would walk somebody through. Of course, you don't have to go into super detail, but just some generalizations. If people want to contact you, they'll be able to get access to you at the end of this webinar, but just to give some ideas about what you think is some of the paths. Like, would they go to hormones? Would they go to peptides? Would they go to other things? What would it be?
You know, it's really getting a person organized around their health. I think becoming your own best doctor is the way that I think about it. And to that end, you know, if I can get you to start thinking about what it is that you want, is really where we begin. So when I'm sitting across with anybody, I want to know what they want. Why are you here? You know, what brings you here? What's on your mind? And to me, conversation is extremely important. I've had thousands of them with you know, many people over the course of over 30 years. So being in conversation for me is very comfortable. And I want it to be comfortable for anybody that I'm working with. I want to know who you are. I want to know where you're weak and where you're strong. You know, what are your aspirations? What are your dreams? What is it that you think you still need in this life, right? And if it's health, because clearly that's the thing that's bringing somebody to my office. I want to know in terms of health, what is it that you want to achieve? When all of that is determined, I'm trying to figure out for myself, can I work with this person? You know, can I deliver on my promise? And there've been times where it was evident to me that this isn't going to work out all that well. So in making in having the interview, in making that determination, I can deliver on my promise. And I think this person has enough capacity to actually deliver enough on their promise to themselves. Then we got a program going. Once that's established, you know what, we can work well together. It's very clinical. There's blood to gather. There's gene testing to do. There are food logs to record. There are activity charts to be kept, so that I know about how you live, what you eat, how do you exercise, what your sleep is like. So I'm starting off easy, and the program may run a certain period of time, from 6 months to a year. Some people have been with me for almost 20 years, which is hard for me to believe. But if I can get you to start paying attention to your body. So rather than saying, listen, you got to go do Vipassana and go away, you got to do 40 years of Zen, you know, can you download Sam Harris's Waking Up app? And can you give me 10 minutes every morning? All right, and start with that. And like I said before, if you're drinking 4 cups of coffee, can I get you to 2? Then can I get you to 1? Just so that you take a coffee holiday. If in 6 months from now, you know, you just can't stand being this happy, you know, and being infirm free, go back to your coffee and eating the way that you did and staying up all night and watching TV. You know, it's all there. And guidance and coaching, I think, are critical. So there, you know, the coaching and the guidance does show up in terms of the conversations that I have. The conversations are meant in large measure to guide people through all these stages, what it is that they need to remove from their life, kind of like a Marie Kondo, I think their name is, of your body. What are the things you need to stop doing? And then can we gradually, you know, get off of these things? And then what are the things that you need to start doing now? As you do that, you're going to get to see the character evolve, think about what's in their best interest. And reading, I think, is essential to my work. So everybody's got to read, and they got to read a lot. And it's not anything really difficult. It may be a book on intermittent fasting. Here, read this, download this. And, you know, why spend our time talking about it? When we meet up again, tell me what you're going to do in terms of intermittent fasting. Really, that's terrific. So you want to do a 5-day fast? Why don't you read The Longevity Diet by Walter Longo? Tell me what you think once you've gotten through that. So to my earlier point, what I want is an educated consumer. I want you to think as well as I do, if I can get you there. And in doing that, what you've got is somebody who's thinking along with you. They're crafting their program. They're hacking their program. They're hacking themselves into better health overall. And that, I think, makes me more of a guide and a teacher and a coach, rather than I'm treating you.
Yeah, well said.
I have a question. An employer of mine, when I was a personal trainer, once told me, said, always explain to your clients the why. You know, why is something working? Why does that function? But that's essentially what you're getting your clients to do. My question is, have you found that the compliance, people actually following through on things, goes up quite a bit when they understand the mechanism or how things function?
Very, very much. I think 2 things incentivize people. Reading is something that will incent you. And I discovered that a long time ago. By getting you to read what I think is relevant, and then you coming back and telling me what you plan on reading on the shoulders of what we've been talking about, transforms the brain. Reading every day, I think, is critical for everybody. And if I have somebody read a particular book, just read 15 pages a day, or you're going to be in a week and 2 weeks and so on. And it makes a great conversation, not just sitting across from somebody and you've got, twiddling your thumbs like you're in a doctor's office wondering what's it to talk about. Well, what there's to talk about is everything. And so reading becomes part of, your transformative process along with the conversation itself. What do we have to say to each other that's going to make this conversation meaningful? And you're going to walk out of here transformed. 1%.
I love that. So I'm going to circle back around on one question, because I think you really nailed something about getting buy-in in the mindset of that person. And as that evolves, that's going to shift and evolve, I think, as you get a person that you work with for a period of time. So in the hierarchy of kind of like hormone regulation, because that seems to be something that's a really big issue, how would you rank phytohormones, peptides, or, well, you could say prohormones or bioidentical hormones, those type of things. How would you rank those in hierarchy and effectiveness? Or when should they be considered and when should they not be considered?
I go case by case. I literally go case by case, and I want to be careful how I say this. I think I know enough by now, and I've got good researchers on my staff where I can sit down and we can go over a case and kind of take it apart and come to a certain conclusion about what's going to be the best path. I like to start easiest of all. So if I'm working with a gentleman who's suffering from low testosterone, low libido, I'm going to start with, let's say, fenugreek. I'm going to start with ashwagandha. I'm going to start with a couple of other nutrients that I know are going to allow your body to actually produce greater amounts of testosterone on its own. I may begin to encourage them to do upper body work so that I can get free testosterone levels up. And I'm going to start to move certain things out of their diet that may be feminizing them, whether it's too much gluten, too much bread, too much starch, too much carbohydrate. So there's an adjustment period that I'll work with. And it may be at that point that I'll introduce certain peptides that are going to accelerate the process, but are going to make you bloom in light of how you adapted your practices, right? Tribulus, right? So I think tribulus is also really quite remarkable. So if you're working with tribulus, fenugreek, ashwagandha, you're going to get improvement in testosterone levels. Now, if I can then get your energy up to a point, if you're not doing it already, to do upper body work, right? So not going out and running, or being on an elliptical, but actually work with weights. That's going to work to get free testosterone levels up, and that's going to work in your benefit. So I may have a lot of takeoff room before I even get to talking about using testosterone, even bioidentical hormones.
I like that. And so you would say that probably on that hierarchy, you would probably go to peptides as a generalization before you would go into bioidentical hormones.
Yeah, because I think that I can get a more ecological result and a more measurable result with peptides now than I could have even 5 years ago.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement. I love that, and I'm fascinated with the peptide field. It seems to be emerging, of course, and now there's some pressure to kind of shut it down, or
I
that
know.
sort of stuff. Yeah. Hopefully, somebody somewhere will win that fight because I do think there's a lot of potential there. Okay, so that's kind of and it would be a similar process for a female, same type of thing. You're going to go through the elimination stuff, and then moving into the kind of more natural or plant-based components, and then maybe moving into a peptide, and then as kind of like the final. I always say the final stage is bioidentical hormones, because kind of once you go there, that like that's it. There's really not a coming back from that, I would say. Is that?
Yeah, and also too, I'm not looking for the quick bullet. So if we go, you know, I've worked with bioidentical hormones so much, and I've seen how fuzzy things can get. You know, like you can be working with someone, let's say a female that's having all sorts of problems. You and I could you know, pick out any, from problems at ovulation to PMS to cramping, and I know that I could probably normalize the experience. And we've worked with people that are PMSing for 2 weeks out of the month, and their lives have been just completely, you know, ripped apart. And if I can alleviate that suffering and do it through the things that I think are working against them, and then if we need to, at the end, maybe bring somebody on board from staff or otherwise that knows how to coach on bioidentical hormones, then we'll do it. But if you're waking up every morning, and morning is a green juice and then a cup of coffee, and then lunch is, you know, between lunch there's croissant, and then lunch is a turkey sandwich, then later in the day there's another cup of coffee, and then dinner it's a bowl of pasta and a glass of wine, you're screwed. You know, you know,
beautiful.
like what, you know, if I put you on bioidentical progesterone, you know, to deal with your cramping, I don't think it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really pertinent point, and Matt and I are in alignment with all those values. Is you got to take care of the lifestyle components first before you start adding in these, like I call turbochargers. A lot of people want to, you know, just soup up the engine and not the suspension, so to speak. And the next thing they crash and burn and make things worse as opposed to better. So I
Yes.
love that. I love that component. Matt, do you have any questions that you want to add to us?
Yeah. Let's talk about longevity. Maybe we can wrap up on this topic.
Okay.
Let me start with this question, which is, barring any freak accidents, how long, and again, we don't know, anything can happen, but how long do you think you might live, assuming that, again, nothing freaky happens?
Right. You know, my mom passed away in January. She was 91. My grandmother, her mother, passed away at 93. And both of them had their faculties intact. I mean, their brains were functioning remarkably well at the end. My mother could do the Friday, not the Monday, but the Friday New York Times jigsaw puzzle. By the time I ran out the door for an hour and came back, it would be done. It would take me a month. You know, and both her short-term and long-term memory was working great at the end, as it ever did. I have to assume that a lot of that was genetics, you know, and epigenetic forces on her too. But certainly she had that as a superpower. I hope I have them, and I would probably guess, you know, there's a couple of things that come to mind. You know, like, do I really want to live that long? Do I really want to live that long? Do I really want to live to 100? It changes. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, it was like, hands down, you know, I want to make it to, you know, 100, you know, 125, you know, now Dave Asprey's talking about 140, and, you know, the Gray is talking about, you know, 1,000 years. And I'm like, sign me up.
I love it.
You know, like I just want to make sure that if I'm sticking around, you know, I can still get up, you know, be in a great mood, be able to run, be able to think clearly, be able to regulate my moods, regulate, you know, excitotoxicity, not have anything at all that could possibly cause me pain when I'm older, you know, like a stroke. And I think that the way that we're going, the way that we're all thinking here, the way that I'm thinking, you know, there's a lot of bullets that we can dodge along the way as the years go on. So I don't mind if I drop dead at 90. I just want to make sure that I drop dead at 90 in remarkably good shape. You know, now that being said, I'm shooting for about 120, you know, and we'll see. But I'm not attached to it. It's not like, you know, I'm not attached to, I got to make it to 120 and everything I'm doing, you know, I'm taking all this NAD and
stressing yourself out. Stressing yourself out trying to get to 120.
You know, exactly. You know, like, do you take NMN, you know, with fat or not? And it's like, who cares? It's like, take it. You know, you're gonna live better. You know, and I think in the end, you know, as I've gotten older, I'm about 6 months away from 70. You know, I'm thinking about how I want it to be when I am 70 and 75 and 80. So I'm planning now for my 80 to be just as good as it is now, as it was when I turned 60, as it when I turned 50. And I think that that's where people need to focus. You know, qualitatively, how do I plan? You know, kind of like planning your financial portfolio.
Yeah, we're big fans of you know, maximizing health span, because lifespan, I think, and I do believe, and we do believe that obviously doing all of these things will add decades on the lifespan. But to your point, you started the podcast with this, we have incredible levels of control on our health span. There's no reason why we can't be rocking and rolling right till the moment where it's all over. And I love that.
Yes. You know, and there are examples. You know, you look at public examples overall. You look at everybody from Jagger, you know, people that I saw, you know, when I was a teenage kid, to Willie Nelson, with all his indulgences. You know, the guy's brain is impeccable. And we could keep picking across the board. You know, Buckminster Fuller at 92 years of age, you know, was thinking with a capacity that would put anybody to shame. You know, that he could talk. I saw Bucky talk before he died. He talked for well over 12 to 14 hours at the Manhattan Center with Werner Hart and his grandson Jamie, and a 92-year-old guy was talking about aspects of physics and science and history that kids in the audience. I was in my early 20s, were falling asleep, but you wanted to listen because you were in awe of this remarkable thinker and human being. So there are many examples out there of what we want to emulate. And I think if we go after that, like, boy, would I like to be like that if I make it to 90, then changes the conversation around.
I had 3 centurions that lived on the little street that I lived on, and probably another half a dozen people who lived into their late 90s. A couple of my grandparents lived a long time. What is the key elements that you feel, or common elements, I should say, that you see in people who have that successfully integrated health span with their longevity, so their lifespan and health span, if you could kind of have them as 2 lanes on a super highway of human existence, especially, is there any key elements that you have found in your work that people who go there seem to have in common?
I think novelty and curiosity, you know, they're key. The Sisters of Notre Dame, which are a convent, I think they're out of Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. They were called the Sisters of the Red Schoolhouses, starting around the First World War. These nurses would go out into these regions of America, and they would teach. And typically it was a converted barn that was painted red. So that's how come they were also called the Sisters of the Red Schoolhouses. But there's a documentary on them, and there's a book written about them. They dedicate their brains at death, about 2/3 of the nuns at death, to be studied in terms of what's so unusual about these individuals. They all live into their late 80s, 90s, they're centenarians. And what they do is they're constantly engaging with something new. So whether it's basket weaving, learning a new instrument, a new language, there's novelty in their environment all the time, an enriched environment. And that's been an attribution in terms of why they may live that long. Now, there are other things too, the community, the fact that they're always socializing, which we know is really critical to a long, healthy life. But I think, listening to them in this particular documentary, what was evident was they're continually injecting something new to do. I.F. Stone, which is a historian, and wrote I think his last book was The Death of Socrates, taught himself at 72 years of age classical Greek. Right. I mean, I was thinking to myself, watching a show with him on it, talking about the death of Socrates, what moved this guy at 72 to do that? But for him, it gave him a high degree of flow, probably added to, the long life that he had. And clearly it looks like adding novelty, right? Curiosity, and with a little bit of difficulty added in there, seems to actually extend out maybe how long you live, but certainly how well you're going to live.
Any other elements that you have seen? Is it like dietary habits, nutritional habits, or lifestyle habits that that people might be surprised of, or things that you found common for people who are living long and strong?
A little bit of wine. Believe it or not, I mean, if you look at the blue zones, the blue zone studies, of course, all the things that we talked about today, but in the blue zone studies, these are zones, quote unquote, regions on Earth, where National Geographic sent a team out, studied people that lived to terribly long ages in northern Japan, in Okinawa, in Sardinia, different regions of South America. And wherever they went, even though the diet was extremely simple, and there were many other things that were common to them, including high socialization, it looked like a little bit of the fermented beverage that was indigenous to that region was consumed often. And that surprised me a lot. And as it turned out, a little bit of alcohol may go a long way.
Very brilliant. That's a good insight. I was in Okinawa, and part of the socialization and the honoring of the elder people, which is nowadays, it seems in North America, we put them in homes and drug them up and never see them again.
Correct.
But there, the culture of respect that was afforded to them, and also they have a process where they play a guitar, like it's kind of a 3-string guitar. And it's not how well you sing, it's how you sing from your heart. And I've had some unusual experiences with some older Okinawans who are playing this, and they're in their dress and they're singing, and they're, half in the bag with their fermented drinks, and they're living to be 95, 100 years old and feeling great,
Unbelievable. And, to your point, socialization is critical. The fact that they've got, their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and staying within their communities probably has something to do, based on our evolution, how well we're going to live and how long we may live.
Beautifully said. Dr. Oz, I could spend hours and hours talking to you, and I hope we can get you back to the show soon. There's a lot of people that are, I know we've touched on so many curious points, some areas that I know that you could probably go in depth. And of course, that is where customization and integration and having a master to truly walk someone through this process. How does someone get a hold of you if they want to, find out about what you're doing? How do they onboard? Do you do, is it only local? Is it on the broader scale? How do people get access to you, your work, and your team?
It's simple. They can go to ozgarcia.com. They're going to get everything there. On social media, if you go to Oz Wellness, they'll get me there too. And that's probably the easiest way. We work all over the world. I had an office in London for many years, in Moscow. And now that we're here, working in this manner has turned out to be the simplest, easiest way of working with people. I never would have thought it.
It's super beautifully said. Any final words that you'd like to share with the audience of Bioptimizers, words of wisdom or integrations, or things that you'd like to leave them with, things that you've learned from your decades of experience in this field? We spend the first half of our lives accumulating wealth and power and pride and position and ego.
And as the years have gone by and I'm here, what I find is most valuable now, as I see my finitude up ahead, and hopefully it'll be, decades away, is the accumulation of peace of mind, stability, good health, the meaningfulness of sociability and relationships, things like that. I want to gather things that are meaningful now to me as a human being that I never would have thought about when I was 20.
Love it.
Beautifully said. And you've been such a great guest. I've got 5 million questions before I started with 2.5. And so we'll have to get you back sometime in the near future. Thank you for taking so much time and being so eloquent.
Let's do it.
Where
are you guys, by the way? Where are you guys?
Matt's over in Panama. I'm in Sedona, Arizona, because I had to escape LA before the lockdown so I could get out in the sunshine and walking and stuff.
But whenever we can travel and we end up in New York, let's definitely connect and go get a great healthy meal somewhere.
Oh, unbelievable. Of course. I got to tell you, I'm in love with the both of you. I'm completely in love with the both of you. This is terrific.
I appreciate it. It's the same mutual thing. I'm loving it. I just feel like it's a big love fest. I've known you forever.
We're all cut from the same cloth, and that's obvious. So.
All right, guys. I'm going to take my dog out for a walk and wear a mask.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great walk. Thanks for a great interview. Appreciate it.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. How to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast, it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.